were fixed to be able to get to where we are now, which of course is absolutely where we wanted this to go. You can't have a better scenario if you're an ACDC fan than this lineup. Article goes on to say, but during the past 4 years, guitarist Angus Young, the last member of the classic lineup still standing, gradually put the shattered pieces of ACDC back together, aided by a mysterious new hearing technology that restored Johnson's singing voice and brought him back into the group. The result is Power Up, the band's upcoming album that reunites the 4 surviving members of the Back in Black incarnation. It's been a long, long road, says Angus on the phone from his home in Australia, but it's good that everyone came on board and we get to pump out a bit of new rock and roll for the world. At this time with the pandemic, hopefully it gives people a few hours of toe-tapping enjoyment. Well, that's exactly what I talked about when I said last week, the first time I heard this song, as goofy as it may have sounded, I said it brought a smile to my face. It felt great. It felt like something positive in what otherwise has been a really shit year. Here's more from the article. The LP was recorded in late 2018, early 2019. Angus raided the AC/DC vault of unreleased songs before they began, and every track is credited to Angus and Malcolm Young. So there you go. The entire songwriting of the album is Angus and Malcolm. Brian Johnson has not written lyrics in about 25 years for AC/DC. Why, I'm not sure. I don't know why it went that way. He did at one point. He has not in a very long time. And even with Malcolm being gone, the entire songwriting credits for the AC/DC record are Malcolm and Angus solely. I'm not going to read you this whole article. You can read it online if you'd like. Just trying to cherry pick out some stuff for you that would be of interest. Okay, so here's Brian talking about his hearing issues. It was pretty serious. I couldn't hear the tone of the guitars at all. It was a horrible kind of deafness. I was literally getting by on muscle memory and mouth shapes. I was starting to really feel bad about the performances in front of the boys, in front of the audience. It was crippling. There's nothing worse than standing there and not being sure. Most fans had no clue what was happening, but it was painful for his band to watch up close. He'd pull his in-ears out and just shake his head, said Williams, via the phone from his home in North Carolina. He couldn't pitch. He was having a really hard time. The band attempted to limp through the remaining dates on the tour, but Johnson's doctors eventually interceded. The doc said, "Deaf is deaf, son." Cliff and Angus didn't want to be responsible for me damaging my ears any further. Shit happens. At least it wasn't terminal. With Brian unable to continue, the remaining members of the band faced a difficult choice. Brian was running the risk of going deaf permanently, says Angus. We had a few days to let everyone know the situation and get the message out. You don't want people showing up and being disgruntled and finding out at the last minute. So, what's really interesting and striking about this article to me already is because AC/DC says nothing ever unless they're doing something, we are dealing with and trying to play catch up on the last 4 years. And I mean, Andy's doing a great job in this article addressing all this stuff, but that just screams to how covert, if you will, AC/DC are. Because any other band would have had press releases and interviews in the last 4 years, and a lot of this stuff would have been addressed, but it wasn't. So any responsible interviewer is going to have to get into this stuff and play a little catch up, which is what's happening here. Okay, so they talk about Axl and them putting out that press release saying a guest vocalist. And then Axl Rose coming in. And the press release, which really was quite shocking and tough to deal with when it came out. ACDC band members would like to thank Brian Johnson for his contributions and dedication to the band throughout the years. We wish him all the best with his hearing issues and future ventures. Axl Rose has kindly offered his support to help us fulfill this commitment. Johnson wasn't quoted in either of these press releases, and rumors began to swirl that he was unhappy with how the situation was handled. You think? 3 days later, he released his own statement. Quote, I don't believe the earlier press releases sufficiently set out what I wanted to say to our fans or the way in which I thought it should be presented. I am hoping that in time my hearing will improve and allow me to return to live concert performances. While the outcome is uncertain, my attitude is optimistic. Only time will tell. The decision to carry on without Johnson seemed a little callous to some fans. You think? But Young insists that he had nothing but terrible options. This from Angus Young, quote, when you run through the different scenarios, none of them were the best options. You think, should we cancel? Then we have the other pieces, the legal stuff and whatnot. We got suggestions from management. Maybe if you try to put something together that you might get, there was a list of people that might fill in out of the blue. Axl Rose contacted and said he could help, which was very good. I suppose we could have canceled, he continues, but either way, when you look at all the options, it's a tough decision all the way around. Well, I have my thoughts on that, but we'll leave it be for now. Johnson phrases things slightly differently. I didn't feel too good myself about the whole thing, but that was then. With all bands and things, there are little bumps in the road. So yeah, look, was it handled right? No. I mean, in no way. Was Brian upset? Clearly. Have they mended that? Yes. Did Malcolm dying, I'm sure, bring a closeness again? I'm sure it did. Cliff Williams goes on to say he himself had some health issues he won't disclose details of. Including terrible vertigo. He says, and I quote, for me, I just thought it was time. Meaning it was time for them to wrap up and him to retire. The final AC/DC show was in Philadelphia on September 20th, 2016, with Chris Slade, of course, on drums. Angus returned to Australia, took a long break, then began pouring through an extensive backlog of unreleased songs he'd written over the years with Malcolm. The majority of these songs come from the period around Black Ice in 2008. There was a lot of great song ideas from that time, he says. At that time, he said to me, we'll leave these songs for now. If we keep going, we'll be overboard. We'll keep them on the next one. That always stuck with me. When I went through and listened to them, I said, if I do anything in my life, I have to get these tracks down and get these tracks out. So this is they had a ton of stuff, a ton of material from 2008, and this is a revisit to that. They talk about George Young passing away. Phil Rudd working through his issues. Just trying to skip forward a little bit because it's a long article. Okay, so when it comes to Brian Johnson's hearing issues and how that got right, the article goes on to say the singer is hesitant to share many of the details, but an unnamed hearing expert came to his home once a month during a 3-year period to try and figure out a solution. Brian says, I quote, the first time he came down, he brought this thing that looked like a car battery. I went, what in the hell is that? He said, we're going to miniaturize it. It took 2.5 years. He came down once a month. We'd sit there and it was boring as shit with all these wires and computer screens and noises, but it was well worth it. The only thing I can tell you is that it uses the bone structure in the skull as a receiver. That's as much as I can tell you. I don't mean to laugh, but I mean, it just sounds like Frankenstein stuff, and they can't talk about it. Again, the clandestine nature of ACDC. Miraculously, the secretive in-ear device allowed Johnson to sing again. The band convened in August 2018 in Vancouver, which tells us those photos that leaked were in fact true, with Brendan O'Brien producing. They talk a little bit about Brendan. 12 tunes they wanted to cut, so there you go. There will be 12 on the record. None of them stray from the AC/DC formula. Some of the song titles include Demon Fire, Witch's Spell, not a ballad or love song anywhere in the mix. All right, so there's the gist of it.